Hello and welcome to What is Tabletop Podcast. I am Frank. I have been a GM for about 10 years now, and with me is...
Hi, I'm Charles. I have been playing D&D for about a year and a half now, and I'm very, very new to tabletop role-playing games, but I'm glad to be here.
And I am not new. That's the dynamic we have going for us, right? Is that even though you're older than me...
Are the young, experienced, the old and inexperienced.
Yes, exactly. That's the idea we have going for us here. On What is Tabletop, where we talk about all things tabletop RPGs, how to get into them, what kinds you should buy, stuff like that. Yeah. Today, what are we talking about, Charles?
Today, we are talking about character creation and character concepts, because one of the most important things about playing a tabletop role-playing game, thus the role-playing part, is picking and choosing and creating your character.
Yeah, I guess, that thing that I have, so little experience about because I am a forever GM.
That's not true, because he creates the rest of the world. He creates what we call the NPCs, the non-playable
characters.
You're
going to be that guy.
Yes, I will be that guy.
Technically, you create characters.
Technically.
Yeah,
yes,
I'm sure,
I am going to be that guy.
I am sure, many other GMs, I have an insane amount of character concepts that I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna make that a character, and that's a character, and that's a character, and then they just plot them all in the world. There's been several of them that ended up becoming villains that I was not anticipating, and then there's several of them that we won't talk about those.
Some of them become super important characters that you make on the fly.
Yeah, we'll talk about improv characters at some point, I'm sure. So, anyway, what you got? What's your first question you got for me?
First question is really, what kind of character should I be playing?
Really, you're just gonna make that broad with so a character is what exactly?
You know what I mean.
I know. Messing with. This is the dynamic we have.
I had to double check my question to make sure I had the right one. I did. What kind of character should I play? What kind of person are you? Or what kind of person do you want to be in this game?
The kind where you have fun. That's the kind of character you should play. Okay, so let's get a little more serious. I'm not going to bash Charles anymore.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah, I probably will. But he gets enough of it. He has a family that probably does it enough for him.
Oh, yeah. But what?
You went to a dark place there. I would say the character creation is a fun part of the game.
I think so.
We're going to talk about it specifically from a player side. We might, like we said, delve into...
I think maybe towards the end we'll talk about more of the NPC stuff like that, because I think they kind of go a little bit hand in hand. We might be able to make a separate podcast about that as well. We'll see. But we'll touch, I think, a little bit on it.
Yeah. So let's talk about player characters.
Yeah.
So obviously, you're showing up, and it's like, all right, we're gonna make characters. What do you want to play? And you're gonna be like,
it was me, Dio, all along.
So that's actually a great place to start. You could straight up just make a character that is a carbon copy of someone else.
It's sometimes those characters are the most fun to play because, again, not everyone is super creative. I want to play this guy with, all these different, flaws and secrets and stuff like that. It's like, you know what? I want to play John Wick.
No. Batman. No.
Both.
Batman, John Wick. John Wayne. And that's definitely not from personal experience of a person we knew who did that exact thing.
I kind of loved it, though. I'm not going to lie.
I think if he had...
For being his first time,
yes.
I thought it was very humorous to, again, and sometimes you run into those, again, that's the thing, too. When you're brand new, sometimes you never quite sure if you should be super serious or have super... I try to find myself someplace in the middle ground, but I always tend to go a little more silly.
So, this guy turns to me and he's like, I want to play Batman. And I'm like, do you want to play Batman or do you want to play a character who's like Batman? Those are two different things, right? Yeah. And so, because if you're just like, in your horror investigative game, I want to play a guy in a bat costume, that could be interesting. But if you're playing literal Batman, then that could have some tone clashes. So when we say playing an exact carbon copy of a character, depending on the system, you might just straight up be able to. If you're playing a DC superhero game, you could just play Batman.
That's the great thing with those type of games too.
Right. But then if you're in a sci-fi game, what the heck is Batman doing in a sci-fi game? But you can change some things around. I think I literally had another guy in college, and I'm just remembering this.
Yeah.
Who wanted to play Batman, and I said, you can't just play Batman. And he's like, what if I played a guy named Brutus Waynefarer? And I'm like, that's better, I guess. You at least put a little bit more effort into just playing Bruce Wayne.
What if I call him Wayne Bruce?
Wayne Bruce? Yeah, sure. Why not?
Why not?
Bruceth Wayneth.
The 15th.
The 15th.
You gotta on the end of all of it.
You can play a carbon copy of a character. I would say change it a little bit, just slightly, so that it fits like the theme and like the tone of the game you're playing. But yeah, carbon copy characters is the first way to go. And what I have found is people will play a carbon copy character, and that character will change drastically from the carbon copy character. So Brutus Wayfarer ended up being a very interesting psychotic chaos monster guy. Mainly because that's what the player was.
I mean, if you really know Bruce Wayne and Batman from the comics, I mean,
you're not off. Yeah, so like he ended up in a completely different spot than where he started.
And that's beautiful about character creation, character concepts, and character growth.
So yeah, you can start off there, just doing a carbon copy of another character you already like.
Yeah, for sure.
You can also just make yourself.
Or a fantasized version of yourself, fictionalized. You don't have to be like, I'm Charles. I'm a teacher.
I don't know. Actually, I think that in a fantasy game would actually be really funny.
Oh
I teach the children, and now I'm on a fantasy quest.
This reminds me of I'm going to reference Dimension 20. The very first one they did about the Fantasy High, the Gallier character, and I don't want to admit that my life is sad because it's not. My life is great, but like that character was super sad.
Yeah.
But the players loved him. It was really funny.
Yeah, and so you can just make yourself. In the sense of like how you make yourself for a like video game, right? Like if you're playing Skyrim, you're like, okay, I want to look like this and this is this. And then you just make choices that you naturally would make. Mm-hmm. So you can do that. I tend to argue most people's first D&D character is the closest they'll get to who they are as a person because you're not used to the ability to like think of another character usually and be like, what would this character do? Not necessarily what I would do.
And that's the fun thing about, again, if you're those, acting type of people, or improv kind of, you will probably have more of a, you'll probably have a better time creating your character, and because you'll figure out the voice and all that'll come later. But just figuring out who you want to be is the fun part.
Yeah, you could also be a very weird concept of like two halflings in a bear costume. And it's like, how the heck does that work mechanically? I don't know. I'm hopefully never gonna have to run that. And Charles, I swear, if you even think about saying that's your next character, he's thinking about it, isn't he? Yeah. Okay. But you could be weird. There's a lot of weird stories, right? Where it's like the bear that has such high deception that everyone doesn't realize he's a bear.
Yes. I love those kind of concepts where it's like, I want to be this character, but I want to like really subvert expectations. And those are some of the most fun characters to be.
Like Chicken Boo from Animaniacs, where it's like, for some reason, this guy almost became president and no one knows why.
And you got to think that maybe those people who created that character played D&D or something.
I would not be surprised. So there's archetypes too.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Archetypical things where it's like, I'm the broody
the
lungster.
Yeah.
That could be what you base off your character off of.
That's kind of what I did with my first character, really. I played a rogue because again, I always I mentioned this last time. I like some of my favorite characters to play as are really charismatic. Most games we've played, one shot or whatnot, I'll play a charismatic character because I like having high charisma. Not that I think I necessarily myself have high charisma, but I think I'd like to be able to talk myself out of situations more so than in combat.
That's another thing too, is like knowing your system, knowing what archetypes fit into that. So if you're playing a fantasy system, right, having a technology guy might not always work because like you might not have the means to do technology in that system versus, doing a swashbuckling rogue in a sci-fi campaign about escaping the alien. Good luck. That swashbuckling rogue's going to die pretty quickly, but good luck with that.
You know what's great about that is that if you play Baldur's Gate 3, I'm going to make a reference. Because you have the Gith Yankee who are basically, like, I argue they seem very alien.
They're
I'm like, I would say they're aliens. But it's very, so that's what's interesting about, I feel like Dungeons and Dragons, that there's an element of sci-fi, but it's more like Star Wars sci-fi. It's like, it's fantasy.
Fantasy sci-fi.
Yeah,
you'll find like a lot of IPs tend to do that where it's like they'll end up being completely different to what they were because like the new writers just happen to want to go in that direction. So so ultimately what you want to do when it comes up to creating a character is come up with that concept. What archetypes are great. Literally stealing other characters, that's fine. Finding out a facet about your personality, whatever have you. Conversely, you could be the kind of person who comes up with the mechanics for your character first and then figure out how the heck you make a character based off of that. There's a few channels on YouTube that do that. I've done in that past where I've made a character where I'm like, I want to play this kind of a character.
Yeah.
How the heck would that character actually act
Yeah.
in the real world, or I guess the fantasy world?
Well, and that's the thing too. Like you, because sometimes your character's kind of displaced to the fish out of water, you know, scenario where it's like, okay, this is my character. How would they interact with these groups of people? We have this one friend who plays the same character.
Yes.
Frequently.
Yes.
He likes to refer to, whereas the rest of us will play different races, different things like that. So we're often called Muppets.
Yes.
Because so is this one?
Well, let's be honest. It was specifically one campaign where you guys were all having very, very specific Muppet behavior. That was like they were a pirate ship, and they were just
we were very Muppety,
very Muppety.
But it was fun. It was fun to be Muppety.
Mm-hmm. And he was the one human in the Muppet movie. That's what we joked about. So that was fun.
Don't fight it too hard, guys. Embrace the Muppetness.
Just come up with that concept. And here's the thing again, right? We've talked about it in the last episode. We'll talk about it again here. It doesn't have to be super deep. It doesn't have to be like the most loved fan favorite character. Do you enjoy playing that character? Yes. Does that character not annoy the living mess out of the players? And I specify players. It can annoy the characters. As long as your friends are also having fun and you're having fun, then it doesn't matter what you've played.
Really, like find out what your, you know, what kind of personality. I think finding out what kind of personality your character has will really help flavor that character. So
it could be as simple as like just knowing how they're going to react in one specific scenario. Like, are they the kind of person to stand and fight or flee? That's going to be like a good personality thing to figure out. Just like asking those basic questions of like, am I more likely to be the first one to suggest let's run away, or am I going to be the one who says no matter what we're fighting until the end? And that could determine a lot about your character, right? If you're the kind of person who's going to stay there until the bitter end, well, maybe you're going to want to play a tank like character, one who can take a few hits. Maybe you're going to want like more personality traits that fit into that. Maybe you're going to create a backstory of like, why does this character feel the need to stay even if the battle is lost? Why do they feel the need to stay? Well, maybe their dad was like this old knight and he didn't do that, and so he got disgraced, or he did do that and he wants to live up to it, right? There's a lot of different things you can do.
That really brings us to our next question, which was a perfect segue. Was like, what kind of, you mentioned this earlier, what kind of information what do I need to know about my character? I'm creating this character. So there are some things that are just so like trivial. Like sometimes like I don't think about like age, height, weight, those kind of things. I'm more of a, again, I like to consider myself a storyteller. I like to think of characters like who they are, like personalities, flaws, background stuff. Those are things I like to spend more time on. Like their age and height and stuff I don't care as much about.
Yeah, I find that when you're explaining a character, if I tell someone to introduce themselves, like people will always be like, oh, here's what they look like. And everyone will forget that almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like most people, unless you have character art, in which case what you do is you just show the character art and then you just remind people, which we had a friend of ours do that in a campaign. Yes. He was playing a very weird alien-like creature.
Yeah.
And so for him, it was like good to have that. But honestly, I think focusing on, like personality traits, we'll go into like a system that I think does a good job of it pretty well. Focusing on that stuff, you can have physical appearance be important, but what should be important about it is story relevant.
Yeah, it should be connected to your character in a relevant way.
Right.
You know, them being 6'2" doesn't really like.
Yeah.
You know, unless you're supposed to be a dwarf and you've had some sort of like
right where it becomes very obvious. It's like you're taller than all the other dwarves,
so you're not really
something's up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so like physical appearance isn't as necessary. Still have like an idea of what they look like. That way you're not just like, they're green and are a frog. You can, I mean, even that, like sometimes, like we have a friend who will just be like, I am this, and it's like, cool. Whatever is the image that comes to your mind, that is what he looks like. It's like, all right, cool, sounds good. But personality things, how you play the character, and backstory is going to be more important. And also the mechanics, like what's written down on your character sheet. That's going to be the most important stuff. So, tips for personality.
Yeah.
D&D 5th edition does this right, actually, surprisingly. It's got 4 different things, which is bonds, flaws, traits, and ideals. Mm-hmm. And so what you can do with all 4 of those things is just come up with 1 or 2 things, or if you're lazy and or can't think of something, the book has examples for certain backgrounds.
And where there's generators out there too, guys. Mm-hmm. So use the internet.
So you can just randomly roll for these things. But traditionally, your like bond is like, what is your character attached to? Mm-hmm. Could be their hometown, where it's like, I'm the guy who leaves the hometown to make money for my 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 place.
I worked in the salt mills.
It could be a person. It could be object. Right. This is the last thing my mother gave me before she died.
Good. I'm just thinking of like a Mama's Boy character.
You could. That would be fascinating.
Oh my gosh. This is one of my favorite things to talk about is character creation because I love the idea of making characters.
Yeah, because the right spark can just make.
Because Frank and I are both kind of writers too, which is nice, and like that's my favorite thing to do is coming up with characters. So whether I'm writing or whether I'm playing role playing games, I think that's why I'm so into them because I love the idea of creating characters.
Right.
So
yeah, bonds. That's just what your character is attached to. Ideals is like your morals, like the
religion,
non-compromising things, which I say it's non-compromising because they can be compromised, but it's usually like I said, the fight or flight reflex. That would be an ideal.
Well, yeah, it could be like your bond and ideals are at odds too. Like you have a strong bond with this character, but they're going against your ideals, which makes it for a good story.
Yeah, you could do something like it's like your bond is your guild, and your ideal is I will never kill an innocent, and then suddenly that guild that you really like and care about killed an innocent. And so now you have to grapple with like, okay, wait, maybe am I still with that guild? Am I still willing to pursue this opportunity? Or is the issue that I have to give up the guild? But now what do I do? Because I don't have a family anymore, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those things can be at odds, and that can create some fun things. You also have traits. These are like specific things. Like basically the way I like to look at a trait is what is like the first thing you would notice about someone. So like for me.
So you think it's more physical?
It can be. It can
okay.
be. So like having a twitch is a trait.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay,
like having a twitch where it's like, oh, that's a unique thing about that person. Yeah. Maybe you are like missing an arm, and that's like important.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right to like your life because like you were in battle and
like
you lost
scars,
an arm.
things like that. Yeah, for sure.
And so, but then it can also be like personality,
because that's what I think of first. It's the personality. But like now that you mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I guess like if it's very unique to you,
right? Like even a stutter, I would say is a trait. Right, that you can have, like the way you talk, stuff like that. But then you can do more personality-based things. So it's like, oh, this guy is kind. Oh, he's too kind. Oh, he's so naive. Like that could be something where it's like this individual just looks at the world through like very rose-colored glasses. You could have someone who's the exact opposite, who's like super skeptical and always is like untrusting of people, and that's like a point of interest.
Yeah, that my second character that I created was the very rose-colored glasses. So I was like, my first character was kind of, like it was really to test the waters to see how I want it. So when I went to my second character, I wanted him to be like, let's make him unique in some sort of fashion, which I felt like he was.
I always enjoy those characters who are like everything's great because then I get to like just watch as the world ruins them. It's so great to be like
the world that you created ruined them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, you thought everything was good, huh? Oh, the world sucks actually.
Well, I gave my character a tragic backstory too. Like I did it on purpose too, because I wanted him to have plenty of
trauma.
Well, it's one of those things too. Like
that's we'll get into backstory.
We'll get to tropes later, yeah.
But yeah, like that's the fun thing too. Is like maybe you have this ever optimistic character that no matter what goes wrong, they are still optimistic, and there's like some like cool like beauty in that. Or you have like the tragedy of like eventually the world breaks them down, and now their personality trait is like everything sucks, and now it's like too far. Like how do we change that? And then finally, flaws, which are a good thing to have. I think a lot of people don't like that, but a good thing to have is flaws because you have the thing that's bad about your character. So like your flaw could be that they are too moral. Like they hold everyone to such a high standard that it's impossible, and yet somehow simultaneously they don't realize when they fail to uphold their standards, right? Yeah. You could have a flaw being like they're too nice, right? It could be the extreme of a personality trait, stuff like that. So also come up with a flaw. Most likely, if your GM's going to use a flaw, they're going to use it narratively speaking. They're not going to use it in a way that like compromises you as a player. They're usually going to do it to where it's like, hey, this is just cool tension. This is cool drama that I'm creating. But if they do use it in a way that's like that, just have a conversation with them. But a lot of games will also come up with like, hey, your character needs to have a flaw because the GM can give you something. And as a result, you have to then act on your character's flaw. And so like coming up with flaws is a cool thing as well.
Yeah, I think so. Because that's the thing too. Like you don't want your character to be perfect, because if your character's perfect, then it makes it really hard for them to, it makes it really hard to like have something happen to them. Like, oh, my character responds perfectly in every situation, every way. It may, if we read stories like that, we would not be reading stories anymore because they'd be boring.
Yeah, like having a character who does the right thing constantly is boring, but having a character who thinks they do the right thing all the time is much more interesting, because then you can do bad things and then they have to justify.
Yeah, they're these horrible atrocities. Which reminds me of the Valeri situation. Is that where you're kind of going?
We had a character who was wanted to play a wizard, such a logical wizard that he didn't have any emotion, and so he would always make the correct logical decision.
His moral compass was very unique in how he made decisions,
and so that required him at one point. Long story, but basically a villain. Let me specify: a villain killed a bunch of kids, and they were going to get caught, and it was going to look like they killed the kids. So what does he logically do? He summons a demon to eat the kids. Logically.
Yeah. It really shows you, like, again, if you're playing your character to like the way you want to play your character and like with their flaws, like it made perfect sense for him to do it the way he did it. So like it wasn't one of those like I'm like, oh my gosh, that's horrible, which it was.
Right.
But like that is what his character would have done.
You always got to be careful. In regards to, like, again, not having your flaw ruin people's fun. If your flaw is kleptomaniac, which is fair, you can have that. Please don't steal from the party. Steal for the party, but not from it. Unless, again, your party's okay with it, unless your players are fine with it. But I've seen a lot of situations where it's like, I steal that cool thing he just got. It's like, I just got this cool thing and you're going to take it from me already? Yeah, and you're not going to know because I have such a high stealth check that I stole it. And it's like, you're stealing someone's fun. You're not stealing a item. You're stealing fun.
The one thing you want to be careful of is not stepping on another player's enjoyment, because it's real easy to do it sometimes. And it happens. Sometimes it happens. You know, sometimes it's an accident. You know, you don't mean to do it. But you just got to be careful with those things too. Like if 9 times out of 10, if you talk to that player that, you know, like, hey, my character's looking on doing this. Like one of my characters took one of the characters' thing, but the player was aware of it. You know, it was more of a prank. It wasn't like I was trying to kill him or anything. So
ultimately, what we're going to come up with, just talk to other people, make sure that the character you're creating isn't ruining anyone's fun. Backstories. That's another thing that you need.
Yeah.
We'll go into that very quick. Doesn't have to be a novel.
Yeah. Nope.
No. A lot of people like to think it is.
But again, I will argue that the more information you give your DM, the easier for them. But however, you do have certain DMs like Frank. Frank doesn't mind filling in the blanks.
No. In fact, I actually kind of like it. But yeah.
That's why we call him fill in the blank Frank.
That is not why they call me that.
They
don't call me that at all, actually. Fun thing about backstories is you can do as much or as little as you want. And again, depending on the game you're playing determines that. You could just be like, I got like a 1-sentence backstory of, I was a village guard and I saw some cool people and I wanted to be like them. Like some heroes. You could have then Silmarillion length backstory. I recommend not having that because I'm not going to read that.
Yeah, you don't want to have too much because, again, you don't want to give your DM homework, really. I mean, a little bit's fine, you know, like, you know, and then like, and if sometimes if you do say you want that really long backstory, it's give them the bullet points, give them the little, like, you know, like, here are the things that are important
TLDR.
TLDR.
This person's important. This person's important. This location's important.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you were to put these things in peril, my character would react to this way. So
yeah, and the fun thing too is for like a GM tip real quick, if you get some stuff, like for example, Charles had a character who had siblings, and I'm like, cool, I'm just gonna have that in the back of his head that I can use his siblings whenever I want, and they're gonna be in danger whenever I want, and they weren't until the end of the campaign.
Until the very end of the campaign.
Yeah, that was fun.
Very sad.
Yeah, that's how it happens though. So that's the fun thing that can happen. But ultimately with backstory, what you want to figure out is everything that led up to your person starting the campaign. What caused the character to be in the position where they are now? And that can be as much or as little as you want. Yeah. But again, ultimately, the fun is up to you on how much you want to go into that.
So another thing we can talk about is this is not as important. We won't talk about this too long, but character voices. So I think it's more important for the DM to be able to do that. But as long as your character, so my thing is like, should our characters have a specific voice?
That's not necessary. You don't all have to like be voice actors. I think Critical Role kind of made people think like, oh, we all have to have unique voices. You don't. I'm stupid and have too many unique voices, but that's also like how I do it. I do think having some sort of signifier as to when you're talking in character and when you're not is a great thing to do. Even if it's as simple as, well, my character says, and then you just start saying it, just to differentiate it, because there is a big difference between me going to Charles in character and being like, I hate you, and him just hearing Frank say that to Charles after his character just did something, versus my character doing that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're wanting to do a voice, there's a lot of resources where you can just learn. My favorite thing to do is just pick a dialect and then just listen to people talking that and try to mimic it.
We have a buddy, Zach Brooks. He was creating a character who was and like I love watching Zach come up with his like his voices and stuff like that, because I think you're similar in this way as well. Because I think you guys are really the only ones. I guess Jeffrey does it on occasion too. But that's something I work on. Like, I don't think I'm a great voice actor necessarily, but like I want to do dialects. I want my characters to sound unique.
Well, and you also will find like dialects that you naturally are better at. I'm phenomenal at a lot of Southern dialects. Horrible at Irish and Scottish. Like, absolutely abysmal.
In my mind, you're better than you realize, though.
No, it usually becomes Australian, in my opinion.
I think we're both guilty of that.
Yeah.
Like, slipping into that different accent.
Well, and that's what's nice is that because you're playing, again, with just your friends, we're going to say that a lot.
Yeah.
You can have the voice not be exactly accurate. Sure, your friends might tease you, but they're your friends. They're going to tease you about everything. And so, right. Like, so for example, there is no Ireland in my fantasy campaign. So, like, I'm not being inaccurate. That's just how this people talk, is with this weird dialect, even though I'm trying for it to be Irish and it's actually coming out Australian.
It's Australand.
Now, let's say, again, you try, and just for whatever reason you can't do an accent that's different than your own. There are many other ways you can do it.
Change your pitch.
Your inflection, like the cadence of your voice.
Yeah, if you're playing like a robotic character, just,
pull a William Shatner. Yeah.
I can't believe.
Yeah, exactly. You can do stuff like that. Also, you don't even need to do that. The first campaign I ever ran, the players were trying different voices, but one of them brought 4 hats and decided, whenever we are wearing these hats, that is when we're talking in character. And so that is what they did. Anytime they were in the hats, they were in character. And it was really funny how I never had to enforce it. They enforced it themselves. So one of them would have a hat on and we'd be saying something. He's like, oh, wait, that wasn't a character, I promise.
Like, that's one of the reasons when I was Tyros, my first rogue character, I was so afraid to do a voice.
Mm-hmm.
I was so skeptical. And then when I became Ambrose, I was like, okay, I committed. I'm going to do a voice. And then in Frank's world, they have like the Germanic Russian, like,
correct.
Dos done, like very like, which that probably sounded horrible. I apologize.
It was fine.
My character was kidnapped as a child. They were a gnome, so they looked young for a long time. So they were kidnapped as a child, and it impacted their voice because they kind of sound like a cartoon character, like an Ash Ketchum type stuff. Like, hey, chances are if you're playing with people, especially if they're a group of people you know, and it's not online and it's in person, they're not going to be too judgmental unless you guys are that kind of, hopefully if they are, hopefully you guys are having fun. It's
right.
It's an understanding, not a bully,
Right. Exactly. And so that's like, that's the main thing about voices and stuff like that.
Just have fun.
It's not necessary. What's more necessary is just the difference between when you're talking in character and when you're not. So that way,
I think it's important to know.
Yeah. Just so that way you're not having any, issues amongst players.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about appearances too, so I don't think we need to go too far into that. Because again, your character is going to be. I think it's important to have like you said, especially we talked about earlier about if there's something unique about them, that should be known.
Right.
I think secrets as well. Like who knows your secrets too.
So funny enough, the first campaign I did, I asked everybody to make a secret, and then what I did is at the end of the first arc, I was like, oh, hey, this guy you defeated had 4 notes for each of you. And I gave each of them a like handwritten note. And then they opened it and they were like none of them, well, some of them shared. And I think that was because like their character would share it. And some of them were like, oh no,
I can't share
I am not telling a soul about what just happened. But there was like some expectation of like, hey, that secret is going to be important. Yeah. Secrets are like these little gems that you can, that the GM can use and cash in whenever they want to almost have like the player do something, right?
If you want to coax your player into doing something, if they have a secret that you can use at any time, especially if they don't want it revealed, it's that's one of the best ways to get a character. But it also makes, again, that leans into like flaws and things like that too.
Now, conversely, the second campaign I ran, everyone had secrets. And by the 4th session, they had all told each other their secrets. They would literally take each other aside and be like, we're going to have one-on-ones and I'm going to share my entire backstory.
Well, you got my secret out of like the campaign we just did. Like I was trying to like keep my family thing secret. And that wasn't a secret. Like the players knew it, but your character wasn't supposed to find out.
Yeah, that's the fun thing too, is like how much you're willing to reveal and stuff like that. So he's talking about a reference to where his character had a family that he didn't want anyone to know about, but my character stalked him. And then he was like, fine, you can come with me to my family. And he was like, yeah. And then my character's secret was definitely exploiting his character's secret.
Yeah. So, yay.
But there's fun tension in that, right?
Yeah.
There's fun in like the fact that we as players kind of know each other.
Oh, let's talk. We should actually talk about that session. What happened to my character?
So here's the thing. I think this actually does bring up a good point, though. You will get attached to this character. You will act like they are a living person.
Yeah.
And so, here's the thing that's inevitably going to happen at some point. Your character will die. Charles?
Yes. Yeah. So,
as a person who has had multiple character deaths.
Oh, man. So in our the campaign we're playing with our buddy, Zach Brooks, my character was genuinely left for dead. Thankfully, it was one of the things, but the only reason this happened, and again, I was fine with it. I just like to make a joke about it.
Yeah, Zach is known for killing characters in the first session, and so he wanted to create a mechanic to where if you died, your character isn't actually dead.
Dead, yeah. So it was one of those things where I'm not going into a lot of detail about it, but my character was basically betrayed by the other player character.
Okay. My character wanted to run away immediately. You all wanted to stay there and fight.
All right, fine.
So,
fine. It was betrayed at least by 2 of the other characters.
You had characters who left him for dead, and then you had one character double back and kill you because it's like, well, we don't want them reviving you and torturing you for information. Even though, like, if you think about it, what information do they would you
What
have?
information did I have?
Like, I don't know.
They could have easily well, that's the thing too. Like I had we're not getting to.
Yeah,
it's convoluted.
Regardless, character death can happen. Charles has had several characters die in my campaigns because I, like Zach Brooks, I'm not a wimp and will kill characters permanently. But that's the thing. There's 2 different ways you can go about this, right? With character death, you can be upset, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that like the first campaign Critical Role did, they were like super sad anytime someone died. Granted, they came back to life, and there are mechanics depending on the RPG system you have where you can still be playing the same character even though they died. In some games, you want to die, but sometimes it's narratively, this is the end for that character. Yeah. Even though the game is not done yet, the character is done. Yeah. Maybe like they have to go off on their own. Maybe they're dead.
It's okay to get attached to your characters, but understand that, especially when you're playing games like where the character can and or will die, just understand that, because that's a possibility. Like, don't get hung up and don't get mad.
Yeah, grieve. That's fine. But like, don't get mad.
Remember, it's ultimately still just a game. Now if it's something where like you feel like the DM or whoever is constantly just killing your characters, that's maybe have a conversation with them at that point, or find a different group, because that does happen.
Yeah, definitely have the conversation. If it continues to happen, find another group. But here's the thing. If your character dies, you get to make a new character. So, like, that's the fun part, too, is that now you get to create this new character. You know what the group dynamic is, so you can create a character that either benefits or maybe, like, disadvantages the group a little bit, whatever tension you want to bring.
Yeah.
That's part of the fun. It's okay. I will say, here's the thing. Depending on the kind of game you play, having a backup character is good. Like having it waiting in the wings, because it means less time in between when you get to play and when you don't. Be warned. I have had many friends who have made backup characters only for them to be like, well, now I don't want to play the character I'm currently playing. So always be careful about like grass is greener syndrome of like thinking, oh, the next character I'm going to play is amazing, but then you have like another character build after that, and then suddenly you're not as interested, and then it just continues down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you want to. Yeah. I think it's always good to have, especially if you're playing a game, playing a role playing game where character death is a common thing, or maybe it definitely happens. Always have a backup. I think always having a backup is good, just like because you don't want to end up dying in the beginning of the session and then not be able to play. Right. That's the biggest bummer of a thing to do. So
yeah, and so that's why like having a backup is fine. But at the same time, like not having one is okay too. Just knowing that like you won't be able to play until you have the next one. Yeah. But yeah, like Charles had a character where he told me his concept for the character. What made that easy is the fact that when his character died, I was like, okay, I know immediately what we can do. Even though we don't have the stats, even though we have some idea of like.
And thankfully, it happened towards the end of the session too. It wasn't like this, and that's the thing too. DMs and GMs, if you're listening, you're out there. Please be mindful of your characters, your players, of their time and stuff. It would really suck to go into a game knowing that you're, like, especially like, hey, characters are gonna die here. Make sure your characters like understand there's that expectation, because if they don't have a backup, and then no one's gonna want to sit there for an hour, 2 hours with nothing to do. Other than and no one's gonna want to roll characters at that point. Again, the goal is just with any game is to have fun. But just keep these things in mind when you're creating your character. So.
And we did talk about it at the beginning, but GMs, if you're wanting characters to put in your world, you can do these same things, right? Having just the 4 like traits, like bonds, ideals, traits, and flaws, knowing that that's what you can build a character off of. That's stuff you can focus on. Don't feel like you have to have an insane backstory for these characters. We talked about it. I have improv characters out of nowhere, literally because it was like, we need a 10th guy. Do we have one? Yeah, sure. You got a guy. His name's Josh.
Josh?
Sure. And it was like, who's Josh?
We all love Josh. We stand Josh. We die for Josh.
Literally, you will find, GMs, no matter how much work and effort you put into a character, it is the one you have to make up on the spot that your players will fall in love with. And then you will learn the lesson of, okay, let me give the bare minimum for each character and then flush it out as it goes. Because Josh was a joke character that I then had to flush out.
I feel like a lot of the characters Frank has created on the fly were the ones like, oh, we love these characters. So.
Yeah, him, a guy named Laros in a previous campaign. They're all so loved, and and again, they came up with backstories later, because I knew that the characters kept exploring these guys, and I'm like, so naturally their backstories are going to come to fruition. But yeah, like that's just recognizing you don't need to come up with all that on the start. And we'll talk about the iceberg model of world building at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's one of the next things we're going to be talking about.
At some point. I think next time, though, we are talking about a specific RPG.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are going to be
talking. So make sure you subscribe for that, so that way you can watch us as we, next episode, delve into 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons and whether or not you should be playing it.
And then, hit the notification bells, too, because that lets you know, hey, they have a new thing up now. So.
If you have any tips on character creation, feel free to put that in the comments.
Or if you have more questions for us, again, let us know.
Yeah.
Even if maybe you have questions just for us personally.
Yeah, maybe some topics or something.
Yeah.
But
so
outside of that, I've been Frank.
And I've been Charles.
Stay witty. Yeah.